Hello, Blue Jays fans. Welcome to East Coast Blue Jays. I'm your host, Patrick McGraw. So the Toronto Blue Jays just gambled their entire season on one arm. That's the question echoing across baseball as Shane Bieber finally prepares to make his debut in the Toronto Blue Jays uniform. The move didn't come quietly. To clear the way, Toronto made a surprising roster decision that sent shockwaves through the fan base. And all while tensions were flaring in Pittsburgh, as you all know, a superstorm cornerstone was taken out of the lineup. You know who he is. In a week packed with drama, high-stakes debut, and a controversial bullpen shakeup, the bench is clearing flashpoints and an injury scare that has everyone holding their breath. Each storyline feeds into the same question: are the Blue Jays on the verge of stabilizing their season or settling themselves up for a collapse? So the new arrival of Shane Bieber. Toronto has been waiting for this moment. After weeks of updates, speculations, and careful ramp up, the Blue Jays confirmed that Shane Bieber will finally make his debut on Friday night in Miami. This isn't just another pitching taking the ball. It's the kind of move that can shift the entire mood of a clubhouse. Bieber isn't a mid-season fill-in. He is a former Cy Young winner whose reputation alone carries weight and whose best form can turn games into shutdown nights. Reports from his rehab outings fueled optimism. Writers pointed to his sharp command, quick innings, and a steady rhythm that looked more like a pitching settling in than one just shaking off rust. Some even noted that his minor league ERA hinted at a pitcher ready to step back into the spotlight. Encouraging signs? Sure, but encouraging is not the same as gratitude. Once the lights came up in Miami, the only question will be whether Shane Bieber can deliver against a big league hitters right now, not weeks from now. For Toronto, the timing couldn't be bigger. The playoff race is tightening, the rotation has been stretched thin, and the front office clearly believes that Bieber can be the difference between hanging on and falling back. But every addition comes at a cost. And to make room for Bieber, somebody had to pay the price. So yeah, somebody had to pay the price, and you know who that would be. And his name is Mr. Braydon Fisher. He was sent down. So when the Jays announced that Bieber's debut, spotlight immediately shifted to the ripple effect. Who would lose their spot? The answer caught fans off guard. Toronto optioned Braydon Fisher to Buffalo Bison, a bullpen arm who had quietly become one of the more reliable pieces in late innings. It wasn't the flashy name people expected to move, and that's exactly why it's so much debate. Fisher numbers told the story: solid outings, dependable strikeouts, and presence that helped bridge the gap between starters and back end of the bullpen. Reports suggested that this was just a temporary squeeze, a simple numbers game to open Bieber's roster spot, with the expectations of Braydon Fisher could be returning back in September, and he probably will. But that didn't calm the reaction. Headlines labeled the move shocking and controversial, echoing the frustrations of fans who felt the team had weakened one area to strengthen another. It wasn't just about one demotion, it was about the message it sent. When a pitcher who's been producing gets sent down, it rattles confidence in the idea of earning a spot. So the Lauer pivot, you call it. Eric Lauer's situation added another wrinkle. Just days ago, he was penciled into the rotation. Now, with Shane Bieber stepping in, the Jays announced that Lauer will be available out of the bullpen instead. The front office and manager John Schneider have been clear. This isn't permanent. They've called it a flexible week-to-week adjustment meant to ease Bieber into the mix without overloading the staff. On paper, a strategic shuffle. Lauer can swing between long relief and spot starts, giving the team insurance while Bieber settles into rhythm. Even if the team insists it's only temporary, a move raises definitely a lot of questions about the pecking order in the rotation and what it might signal if Bieber struggles early. It indicates the balance, protecting arms, managing innings, and keeping the clubhouse on board. But while the rotation was shifting, the tension inside the ballpark was about to boil over. Because in Pittsburgh, tempers flare and the Jays found themselves in the middle of a storm. And you know what happened there? So there was definitely a lot of tension in Pittsburgh, wasn't there? So the tension didn't just live on the lineup card, they spilled onto the field. In Pittsburgh, its seemingly ordinary game turned into a chaos with tempers flared between Tommy Pham and Blue Jays catcher Tyler Heineman. When started with words quickly escalated. Within moments, both dugouts emptied, players rushing onto the grass, and the benches clearing confrontation. It didn't get out of hand, but it was enough to spark headlines and highlight just how thin emotions are running this late of the season. Especially the Jays are in first place, and the Pittsburgh Pirates are like 20 games behind 500. But the story didn't end once the players left the field. Reports say Pham carried the clash online, firing off social media posts that included pointed claims aimed at a Jays player. That was Addison Berger. And Tyler Heineman as well. These posts were widely picked up, but it's important to stress they're claims, not established facts, and should be treated as such. Still, the coverage gave the story longer legs than just most mid-season dust-ups, and Pham's reputation only poured gasoline on the fire. Reuters quickly connected the moment to his history, reminding readers of the infamous fantasy football slap and the other past confrontation that painted him as a lightning rod for controversy. Whether fair or not, that context made these benches clearing incident more than just another flare-up. It turned it into a saga that pulled Toronto directly into the spotlight. For the Jays, timing was brutal. With the Cy Young winner stepping in and a division race tightening, the last thing they needed was outside noise clouding the clubhouse. Yet, even as that storm swirled, the bigger scare was happening behind closed doors. On the trainer's table, because the tempers cooled, the focus shifted to a franchise cornerstone limping off the field. And you know who he is. So if the roster shuffles and the benches clearing weren't enough, the biggest scare of the week came from the one player Toronto can't least afford to lose. You know who he is? Vladimir Guerrero Jr. left Monday's game with a limp, and the sight alone sent a chill through the fan base. A hamstring issue in the dog days of August can derail a season, and for a moment it felt like everything could unravel. The MRI brought relief, no tear, no major damage, just inflammation. The official word day to day. Guerrero still missed a second straight game, but compared to the worst case scenario, the news was almost a sigh of relief. The team made it clear they would treat cautiously and that patience was the smarter play than forcing him to be back into the lineup. But patience doesn't erase impact. Without Vladdy, the Jays' offense feels different. Opposing pitchers can attack the order more aggressively, knowing the lineup's most intimidating presence isn't waiting in on the deck circle. Guerrero's power, even in a streaky season, changes how everything in the inning is pitched. His absence doesn't just remove a bat, it changes the psychology of the game. That's why Bieber's debut carries an even more weight. While the lineup waits for its cornerstone to heal, the Jays need stability on the mound more than ever, because in the middle of the playoff race, a missing superstar isn't just a gap, it's a reminder of how thin the margins really are. And with so much riding on one start, the conversation shifts to the stakes and skeptics and what will Bieber truly represents for the Toronto Blue Jays season at the end of this season. For the Toronto Blue Jays, the arrival of Shane Bieber is more than just a rotation boost. It's a full gamble. On paper, they've brought a former Cy Young winner with the kind of resume that can anchor a staff. But beneath the excitement sits the question everybody's asking. Is this the same Bieber who once dominated the American League? Or is it the pitcher fighting to find what he used to have? Recent coverage framed the move as a high risk, high reward. The Jays are banking on a version of Bieber that still has the command, the pose, and enough bite and his stuff to go deep into games. Rumors just suggested that his velocity may be what it was, but reports claims he's tuned up outings showed crisp locations and ability to miss bats when it mattered. That's encouraging, but it's still untested under the full presence of a pennant race. Skeptics do argue that the team just pushed chips to the center of the table, gambling on a pitcher with recent injuries and uncertain durability. Optimists counter that even a slightly reduced Bieber is better than the arms in the league, and that presence brings confidence and stability to the rotation that's been scrambling for weeks. That's the divide. Risk reverse reward. Doubt reverses belief. What's undeniably is that every inning Bieber throws from here forward will be weighted, dissected, and judged against the cost Toronto paid to bring him here. If he delivers, the Jays look like visionaries. If he falters, critics will say that the writing was on the wall all along. And with the division tightening day by day, the next chapter only gets more intense. So yes, the race has tightened. Every decision the Blue Jays make right now is amplified by the standings. The American League playoff pitcher has no room for error, and each series feels like a coin flip with October on the line. Bieber's debut doesn't just come at a confident moment, it comes as rivals are surging, schedules are tightening, and the window for mistakes is closing fast. National coverage framed his arrival as Toronto's counterpunch in a division race that has suddenly gotten a lot more urgent. The Jays can't simply tread water right now. They need momentum. Miami becomes the test. Take the opener, set a confident tone, and send a message that this rotation can carry the load. Lose it in every storyline. Bieber's readiness, the bullpen shovel, Vladdy's hamstring gets shaper teeth. The math is unforgiving. A strong week from the rotation means the bullpen breathes easier, roles stay intact, and the offense can find its rhythm without pressing. A few short starts, though, the Toronto risks slipping back into the same cycle or overtaxed relievers in late innings collapse. That's why Fisher's demotions, Lowry's pivot, and Bieber's debut all feel interconnected. These are just roster moves. They're stress tested for the organization. The Jays aren't chasing style points. They're chasing survival, and that means the margin for error in the weeks ahead is thinner than ever. Which brings us to the final question. Did the Toronto Blue Jays just steady the ship or steer the waters? So this week could remember as the turning point for the Toronto Blue Jays season. On one side, it brought the long-awaited debut of a Cy Young winner, Shane Bieber, a move meant to steady the rotation and calm the storm. On the other hand, it forced a surprising bullpen demotion, exposed tensions, and a benches clearing incident. The left fans holding their breath over Vladimir Guerrero Jr. hamstring. The common thread is a risk. The Jays gambled on Brett's health and form, gambled on shifting trusted arms to make space, and gambled that the clubhouse rattled by drama can lock back in when it matters the most. If those bets pay off, this week will be as the moment Toronto seizes control of its own story. If they don't, it may be remembered as the week the cracks first show. Either way, Friday isn't just a start, it's a verdict of emotions. One that could define how this season, and maybe the roster, will be remembered. But thank you all for coming in here to East Coast Blue Jays. I'm your host, Patrick McGraw. You guys have yourself a great evening, and we'll see you next time. Like I always say, let's go Blue Jays.